Hey everybody, welcome back to The Deep. We appreciate you being here. If you haven't yet, please make sure to like and subscribe. We do a different show every week, so thank you for joining us. This week I got a very special guest with me, WDWNT fam and legend, Ron Deanna. How you doing, Ron?
Good. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing really well. Thank you again for doing this. So I reached out and said, hey, I want to do a movie. Ron, you came and stepped up and you said, hey, here are a couple I want to do. And we settled on one, and the movie we settled on was...
Candleshoe.
Right, which is actually one that I have sort of pitched to people before and yet didn't know what the heck it was. I really thought I kind of had a beat on this. I thought this was like sort of a Pollyanna type of thing, and I turned it on, and it is definitely not Pollyanna. It has, I guess there's an aspect of it that's Pollyanna where she goes to live with this lady, but man, it is something different.
Yeah, it definitely comes out of that 60s and 70s like adventure movie that they kind of did. Like if you go into like Moon Spinners and like Blackbeard's Ghost, like those kind of adventure comedies that they had.
Yeah, it's and the other thing that I thought was interesting was, and I'm going to get this guy's name wrong, but Norman Toker, is that how you pronounce his name, the director?
I think so. He's done so much stuff.
Yeah, like I looked up and he had done more than a dozen Disney movies, including The Ugly Dachshund, The Happiest Millionaire, The Cat from Outer Space, which is one of my favorites, and this one. So it's interesting to me that he had these like late 70s movies that he was doing, and unfortunately he passed away 1 year after Cat from Outer Space came out, so he passed away in 1979. It definitely is a 70s movie. Like I get very Welcome Back Kotter vibes from Jodie Foster's character when she's still in L.A. It seems like very again, Welcome Back Kotter. It's like the class has come to life when she's running around the streets of L.A. I don't know if you felt that or not, but it's definitely in your face 70s, right down to the font that they use in the opening titles.
I mean, everything felt super 70s about it. I mean, I even feel like there's scenes that are like trying to be the Disney version of the French Connection chase at one point.
Yeah, and the way that they, they transfer over to Candleshoe, and for anybody who hasn't seen this movie, it, again, definitely wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Basically, Jodie Foster's character is pulled aside by a con man who wants to try to pass her off as this lady's daughter and the heir to Candleshoe, which is like, it's a castle. So I guess, again, Candleshoe wasn't really sure what it was, so it's his castle. And so he takes her to London to try to pass her off. And so in that way, it has sort of a My Fair Lady vibe to it, where he's trying to like kind of take her from street urchin to passable like little girl princess. And so it was one of those things that I kind of passed over before, but when you look at the description in Disney Plus, it listed as a coming of age family crime movie, and I'm just like, that's a lot, but it actually kind of delivers on all that.
Yeah, it feels, as I was saying, it feels like a very piece of the time that Disney was doing in that Ron Miller era, where they are just trying to mimic other things in a Disney way, and that adds a family aspect and like to that kind of 70s kind of crime like con man movie that was like, The Sting and all that were popular.
And it felt a little bit interesting in the beginning because I had just watched Pete's Dragon with Katie. We had done a review of that one, and that was just a year prior to this one. And when that one came out, they were still doing the old-fashioned play all of the credits at the beginning before you get into the movie, like a lot of the Disney classics do. And in this one, they're playing the credits at the beginning, but there's actually a like action happening. They're actually setting the stage like they do modern day now, which surprised me because it felt a little bit like maybe this was that era where they were bridging, going from showing you all the credits to like sleepy music like they do in Lady and the Tramp and some of the older movies, to what we see today in like a Marvel movie where the credits don't even really roll until the very end of the movie in a lot of cases.
Well, 77 was kind of the pivotal point for that with Star Wars. George Lucas got warned by the Directors Guild about not having credits at the beginning of the film and doing the opening scroll in its place. And he had some sort of agreement with them where he didn't get kicked out, or he got just a warning that it was so crucial to the story he wanted to tell that that was put in place. And I think that really started to change the atmosphere of that. Because, I mean, even like you watch a lot of those 70s disaster films, like it was everybody's at the end, and at the end you have one title card with like the grip and the best boy, like just the
Right.
real below the line people at the end. And this is the era where you get all the credits started to happen right around now.
That is pretty cool. I hadn't even thought about that. That George Lucas kind of changed the game on that, because you're right. I mean, the whole thing about Star Wars is that kind of open with the scroll, and then it moves right into the action. And maybe that's why, like, those of us who were like around when Star Wars came out fell in love with it so much. So here's another thing. You can't talk about this movie without the cast. Jodie Foster had been in Taxi Driver, and then Freaky Friday in '76, if I'm not mistaken, and then this was actually her second film with Disney.
I'm not sure about the order, but I'm just so surprised that, like, you think they wouldn't, like, she did all this before Taxi Driver, you know?
Yeah.
Because Disney usually doesn't go to the actors who've had those kind of real dark films because they don't want to be associated with that, but she was still a kid, so I guess they thought that was okay. Like, you're not going to see De Niro in a 70s Disney film.
Yeah, it usually goes the opposite way, like Miley Cyrus, where she starts out clean and fancy on Disney and then moves into the crazier rock chick scene that she's in now. But there was another thing that she did for Disney called Menace on the Mountain. Apparently it was a like a Wonderful World of Disney made for TV that was in 2 parts. And did you ever see that one?
No.
Yeah,
I mean, this felt like this should have been a Wonderful World of Disney kind of thing. It really had that kind of lower budget feel for most of it.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. So then David Niven is in this, and he plays a character named Priory, and you're shaking your head already.
Yeah, he's a legendary, and he owned this film. Like, his supporting character, I think, was what made the entire second act, I think, watchable.
Watchable. Okay, that's going to make it interesting at the end when you tell us how you really feel about this movie. Watchable. That's a buzzword for you. But one of the things that going into this is I watched the trailer ahead of time, because that's something that I often do for these older movies, is just watch the trailer to get a vibe for it, which is, again, when it kind of threw me what kind of movie this was. But in it, they do this thing where they're like, David Niven as, and David Niven as, and David Niven as, and it made it seem like David Niven was going to pull a Coming from America, a Nutty Professor, kind of a trying to play multiple parts, Dick Van Dyke even in Mary Poppins. And so I was kind of prepared for that to be just the cheesiest thing, and didn't realize the twist that he was just dressing up because he was trying to cover for Helen Hayes' character not being able to afford to pay the help. And once I saw that, I was totally bought in for his character, because then you feel for how much he loves her and how much he's trying to keep the house together, and he's going to these lengths to dress up in all these different outfits, which again to me kind of saved it, because I was expecting the worst.
I know he was did he do that kind of thing in the Pink Panther films? Like, obviously he would play different parts. So, I mean, it was definitely a role almost written for him. I couldn't think of anybody else who from that era who could do it. That would be great. And yeah, I mean, he was a standout performance. I mean, Jodie Foster was great at it, but she's still kind of a kid, and obviously playing it a little campier than she does a lot of other things.
Yeah, and then Helen Hayes, who had been in a ton of stuff, including some Disney movies like Third Man on the Mountain and Herbie Rides Again, is in this, and I think does a great job. And I think she and David Niven both bring a lot of credibility to this movie, and I think did an excellent job in the acting. I think that most of the characters do. I think maybe some of the kids are a little bit shaky at times, but I think overall, the acting was pretty good. Leo McKern, I had not heard of him before, but one thing I tracked him back to was this horrible 80s movie called Lady Hawk that I loved, and I think no one else had seen. You've nodded your head, so you've seen it?
I think so. It's been a while. I know the name, and it gets passed around in like those 80s B movies you should watch kind of thing.
Yeah, it has Matthew Broderick, Rutger Hauer, Michelle Pfeiffer, and the basic story is that she is a hawk by day and he is a wolf by night, and they love each other, but they're in this curse where they can never really, be together because they transform at night and day. And so I reference it so much, and no one ever knows what I'm talking about. So it was interesting to see that this guy who plays basically the Flim Flam Man in here was also in Lady Hawk, and just finding a connection there. Another thing that I kind of got from this movie was sort of, I mentioned My Fair Lady, I mentioned a little bit of Pollyanna, a little bit of Welcome Back, Kotter, but also a little bit of Annie. I mean, it has kind of that Annie vibe too, because just like Rooster is the Flim Flam Man who's trying to get in there and take Daddy Warbucks' money, Harry is the same kind of a character.
Yeah, she definitely plays it up, and she's a better con man than he is about the whole thing. Like, she's the one who sells it. Like, he wants to go in there overwhelming with all these stories, and she knows, no, you got to play it this way. And I think that's just great on Jodie Foster. Just like being she's the child lead, but she's still the lead, and still, holds her own or outperforms a lot of the veterans in this thing, because he's like, I don't know his name, but you recognize him from other bit parts over the years that McKern.
Yeah.
And like I'm watching the movie, I'm like, I know that guy's face, but then I look at his credits, I'm like, I've seen a million of these movies. He's obviously not the lead, but he's in these things.
But he was definitely, definitely you hated him in this movie. He definitely did a good job of doing that. One of the things that he does that's horrible is he steals the money that they've been saving up to pay the taxes so that they don't lose Candleshoe. And this bothers me a little bit, and play along if you agree, is that it's £100, which in today's money would be $124. So they were £100 short, regardless of what that is, and it doesn't sound like it's too much money. But if at £100 short, they have to sell the manor, but as they're packing up, they have weapons and ancient like armor, and then she's driving what looks to be a Rolls Royce. Like, why couldn't they, like, it feels like a plot hole here. Why could they not have sold something else to save the family, or made the money much more unreachable?
Well, Jodie Foster's character actually says something about that at one point. Like, you have all this stuff, and he's like, well, we've sold the originals, and these are all like copies and stuff, so she doesn't know what's going on, and the car's already been mortgaged and all that stuff. So they actually do address that in like one conversation, I think, between Clooney and Casey.
Gotcha. Okay, fair enough. It just seems so crazy when she's like, "Oh, not my car," and I'm like, "But your whole house is gone. Like, why couldn't they have come up with something on that one?" So another thing is, and I don't feel like this is necessarily a spoiler, because I feel like if you have not seen Candleshoe, and it's what now almost 50 years old, that you probably there aren't really going to be any spoilers for this. But at the end, in this, they're trying to convince everyone that Jodie Foster is the little girl that they've lost. And at the end, they don't really clear that up in any way, shape, or form. They leave it very open-ended. They don't tell you that she is, and they don't tell you that she isn't. I guess the whole kind of like underlying tone is that it doesn't matter. I mean, does that kind of ending, did that sit well with you?
It kind of did. It reminds me of the ending of Inception with the top twirling. Because at the end, the audience is left wondering, is it going to stop? Is it going to not? But you realize the whole filmmaker's intention was, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if she's really, where it was her granddaughter, because she is now her adopted family. She did find her family. So that's all that really mattered in the end of this story. It didn't matter if she was the blood granddaughter. She was one of the new grandkids that the Marquise had adopted.
Yeah. So also, I feel like in modern movies, there are always Easter eggs and things, and I don't think that was ever a thought for people back in the day. But there is one scene in L.A. when she's trying to run from the cops early in the movie where they turn a corner and there's a white Volkswagen Bug. Any thought that at this point that could have been a throwback to Herbie, or not really?
I mean, at this time, Herbie, in the 70s, Herbies were their biggest moneymakers, but it was also a bug in the 70s, which there's a reason, like, we grew up playing Punch Buggy. You couldn't go 5 seconds without seeing one in a car.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, I guess I looked at it and went, oh, that could be Herbie. It didn't have the stripes on it or anything, but it just was so funny that it just was right there on the corner when she's running around. The other thing was the Winnie the Pooh and Piglet that were supposedly her granddaughter's actual stuffed animals that she presents to her. Again, I wonder if that was on purpose that they chose Winnie the Pooh and Piglet, or just because that was something that was very well known in England at the time.
It was probably both. It was something that they own the rights to and can promote. And when did Many Adventures come out as a package film? It couldn't have been too.
Yeah, I feel like that was 77, 79, somewhere in there.
So, promoting that, cross-promoting that, I mean, it's not a new thing that Disney cross-promotes everything that they do. And it's something the audience recognizes, and it's something also inherently British. Yeah. And one of the things I did like about this film is they didn't dumb down the British language, but they would say, like, the British slang and the British terminology for things, because the kids or the other actors would say something that's like, oh, the line's engaged. It's busy. Like, so they were using the real ones and then kind of explaining it to the American audience, which I thought was actually a pretty good piece of script writing.
Yeah, that one actually stood out to me as well when they're making the phone call and he says it's engaged and she goes, what? And he goes, it's busy. Like, you silly American. Here's how you're supposed to say things. But that one did stand out to me too. That is a good point. So anything else that comes to mind for you in this movie?
I think the points are it's like you don't get an ending, and one of the things I wanted to look at is it was based off a book, so I wanted to see if the book gave a definitive answer. But then I realized the book has nothing to do with this movie at all, except that a bunch of kids are defending an old manor from some people who want to steal some treasure. That's the only thing in common. Like,
really?
Yeah, I forget the author's name. He's
Michael Eanes, Innes. And it was called Christmas at Candleshoe. I did see it in the credits, but I never looked past that.
Yeah, I looked into it. It has nothing to do with Christmas. It's referring to a sculptor named Christmas, who's apparently the one who makes the statue that is a pivotal point in this movie. Mm-hmm. He made the statue, and the other thing, it wasn't about a pirate's treasure. There was just some treasure hidden in this old manor that's being protected by some, like, almost Robin Hood-like kids with bows and arrows, which makes a lot more sense because, the big climax in a lot of these movies is the kids fighting a bunch of, really dumb criminals who can't seem to get their act together. But these were particularly bad at being criminals. Like, it made Home Alone criminals look like, Ocean's 11 trying to break into something.
Yeah. Well, and like when the one little kid is like swinging the pot around, like he's trying to like get a good, like, kind of like wind up, and the other kids are wrestling him down to the table. And then when the guy finally gets up, he hits him with the pot, and of course he falls down, and the kid couldn't have been, more than like 8, I think, and he's like slapping him in the head with a pot. I'm not sure that would have knocked him out. Yeah, so it is kind of crazy. There were so many of them versus the older woman and the older butler and the slew of little kids. That's a good point.
And the other thing I thought, there's a lot of 70s stuff that would cannot fly today in this movie. Particularly like when we're first introduced to Harry, like when he first meets Jodie Foster's character, the first thing he does is like just slap her across the face.
Yeah.
Like, that is not going to happen in a modern movie. And the other thing is the little Asian girl, when there's the kids are fighting in a way kids do. When it cuts to her about the fight, it cuts to a stereotypical like Hong Kong Phooey type of music cue, and all of a sudden she knows Kung Fu and like beats up Jodie Foster's character. I'm like, oh no.
That is a little much. You know what? Speaking of like when Harry comes and he meets up with Jodie Foster, there's a lot of that could feel awfully wrong about an older guy coming and getting a young girl and taking her somewhere. And for some reason, and maybe it's just because it's the setting of the 70s, it didn't feel that way. Like, it didn't feel super creepy. It was like, oh, where is this going? What is he trying to accomplish here?
And it was also, obviously Jodie Foster knew how to play well beyond her age from Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
But still being vulnerable, but being overly mature. And she controlled the situation from the start. Like, she recognized he was a con man. She recognized what the con was. She just wanted in on it. So I don't feel like she was being like taken advantage of there, because I feel like she was like, this is an opportunity for me. I'm going to play along with him.
Yeah, that's a good
And I
point.
think that's what keeps it from, I mean, it's creepy, but it still keeps it from being like really bad.
Yeah, no, you're right. There are a lot of things from the time period that again today, by today's standards, would not fly. So I think all encompassing, the movie has a good flow. It's an hour and 40 minutes. It didn't feel too long. It kind of got the points across, carried the story all the way through. It never really seemed to me to have too many slow points in it either. So, I felt pretty good about it.
I generally enjoyed it. I actually, when you gave me the list of movies, I picked this one off the list because it is one I had seen once before. I actually have it on DVD, and that doesn't say I love it. It's just, sometimes we had the Disney Movie Club, where we go through the, buy one, get, a bunch 60% off, and it was like a $4 DVD at some point, so we picked it up. But I really do like this era of films. Like, you just did The Black Hole, and I would have loved to have done that, because that's a film I really grew up, like, there were like 2 or 3 movies when we went to Major Video, which was like the precursor to Blockbuster that I had as a kid. It was one of the ones I constantly rented. So my dad's like, "Oh, how much is to buy it?" And back then, like, if it wasn't like a mass-produced movie, it was $100 for a VHS.
Right.
So I wasn't going to get it. But The Black Hole was that kind of era thing that I really love, and this feels like it fits into that kind of time period.
Yeah, for sure. So, with all that said, with all we've said about this movie so far, and the fact that, again, that you picked it out of the lineup, I need to ask you, Ron, would you recommend this movie?
I actually think I would. It's not, a blockbuster by any stretch of the imagination, but it's very solidly done, very well acted with, I'm forgetting the old lady's name, but I think it was her last or second to last film.
Helen Hayes?
She died the next year, I believe. Niven's only had a few more films after this, because he died in '83. And, I mean, there's great performances here, even if it is kind of a B kids flick. It's not treated that way. And, I mean, there was some weakness with, like, the other 4 kids are just kind of like, all right, let's find 4 British kids at an open audition and bring them in. But all the adults, even the ones that are acting over the top, are solid. The story's solid. Like, I think they from what I read of the description of the novel, I think they did a good job of finding something they could work with out of that story that wasn't kids shooting people with bows and arrows.
Right.
So this is definitely a solid film that I would recommend. If you like things from this era, if you're used to more modern films, you're not going to really enjoy it. But I think if you like any kind of film history, you'll find something good here.
Yeah, you know what? I agree with you. I would also recommend this, and something that's a little different than my normal pattern, and is normally I would say I recommend this to people who are Disney fans because it's an important piece of Disney history. In this case, I don't think that's the case. I think there are a lot of people who love Disney that would be able to pass this one up because, I think that the quintessential Jodie Foster for Disney fans is probably Freaky Friday, and I think that it's probably... it's not represented to my knowledge in the parks unless there are some Easter eggs that I don't know about. So overall, I would say, it's not just a Disney fan movie, but I do think it is an overlooked gem. And a lot of times when we're doing Deep in the Plus, that's what we're looking for. And I think it is a good, entertaining family movie. I don't think that there's anything that wouldn't be, entertaining for people or that would be offensive in general. So I would recommend it as just something that would be a little bit different. And you're right, it is very much of the time period, so you have to sort of give it a little bit of 70s forgiveness. But I think that past that, it is not... it stands up fairly well, and I think is an entertaining movie that you could watch with the whole family. But if you disagree with us or you agree with us, we'd love to hear what you have to say. Leave a comment below or hit us up on social at Deep in the Plus on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And Ron, thank you for reviewing this movie with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Did you notice one thing I wanted to talk about is the facade that they use for the outside of the house. Did you recognize it from any other movies?
No.
Because it's in a lot of things. Yeah, the actual Candleshoe Manor is Croft Manor from the uh, Tomb Raider films,
Okay.
and it was also used in the opening credits for Silver Spoons as the mansion.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
That's crazy.
I'm like, I recognize this house, so I looked it up, and it's been used so many times, including the Silver Spoons opening credits.
So Ricky Schroeder and Angelina Jolie have both walked through those doors.
If they ever actually went there, I thought it could have been one of the Wayne Manors at one point, but I don't think it was any of those.
The inside of it definitely had sort of a Fowl Manor vibe, or because of the way the stairways are set up. If you saw the new Artemis Fowl, but yeah, definitely.
But that was all Pine Tree Studios.
Yeah, it's very cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Ron. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Ron. So you also know how this works. You need to pick a pick of the week, and what are you watching on Disney Plus that you want to recommend?
This is another one of those older pieces that I think is, not ground shaking for Disney, but quintessentially Disney. I think people need to see something like this to understand the company at the time. Is Yellowstone Cubs. It's one of the true life adventure series that takes place in Yellowstone Park with a couple of grizzly bear cubs that are kind of separated from their mother bear and are running amok. And it's not the most amazing film. It really highlights what Disney does well with adding a story to those true life adventures that they continue with the Disney nature films that a lot of other documentaries don't. But it also highlights a lot of the manipulation that they did with those animals, and something like takes it away from being a documentary. Like, there's things that, even if they are really documentarians, they're not supposed to interfere with the animals, but there's definitely things that happen in this film where you think, like, okay, real filmmakers probably would have stopped them from doing this. And I think it's important for people to know that side of the Disney company as well, that they let these things happen. And that was part of the time period, but it's still an engaging true life adventure with some really cute bear cubs running amok and causing some havoc.
Yeah, and True Life Adventures is kind of one of those things when you look back at old like Disney things that was sort of a passion of Walt's, and I think it kind of makes sense that Nat Geo is now part of the family because they do a lot of that stuff too. But obviously, in 2020, they're doing it with a lot more care than they were back in the day.
Yeah, like the story of like how we think of lemmings jumping off cliffs. That's part of Disney's fault from one of those true life adventures where they kind of ran the Jeep at some of them to have them jump into a lake so they could film them running off a cliff, because they really don't do that. And like, they'll migrate a little bit into a lake, but not the way like we always considered lemmings as suicidal. But that comes from, I think, the White Winter or the White North. It's one of the early true life adventures.
You mean it's not like in Zootopia, like when Nick sets up the popsicle stand and guides the lemmings in towards the popsicles? It's not like that for real.
No, and nor do they jump off cliffs with little umbrellas and diggers.
Well, that's disappointing. All right, very cool. So I actually picked something that is an old thing, but just added to Disney Plus, and it is Schoolhouse Rock. As a matter of fact, Schoolhouse Rock came up today in our house, and we were talking about this vocabulary word that we do on News Tonight. I was trying to figure out what part of speech it was, and then everybody is walking around the house singing the noun song from Schoolhouse Rock. My wife is an educator, so we used to watch these a lot, and we had them on VHS. But it's really cool to see them all in one place. There were multiple versions. There was like multiplication rock, grammar rock, history rock. And they're actually released. They released all of them at once. They are on Disney Plus as season 1, which is kind of exciting to think that they may actually add some more or make a season 2. But there are 51. Like, I could not have told you there were that many. I would have said there may be 40 tops. But there are 51 of these, including some that talk about how computers work, called Scooter, Computer, and Mr. Chips. So, I mean, it's kind of fun to watch these. There are some of these that are still very useful. Again, as we walk around the house singing the noun as a person, place, or thing, it really kind of like harkens back to, trying to learn your ABCs to music. So I mean, if you don't know Schoolhouse Rock, shame on you. But I would definitely recommend that you go tripping through these again. And tripping might be the right word because the 70s were a very crazy time. Anyway, Schoolhouse Rock on Disney Plus now. You should definitely check it out. Thank you guys for joining us for watching the show. We'll see you again next week. And Ron, thank you so much for doing this with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Anytime.
If you like what you're watching, make sure you like and subscribe. You can also find us on social at Deep in the Plus on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you're a Disney Parks fan, don't forget to catch me and Rob on Park Center Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. on WDWNT.com.